Thank you for listening to the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast with host Clara and Jimmy Hinton. If you're new to the podcast, please subscribe and share so you never miss an episode. Search for us on your favorite podcast app, or you can find the podcast on jimmyhinton.org and findingahealingplace.com. Please rate our show, subscribe, and share so we can spread the word. If you would like to support us and get exclusive rewards, go to patreon.com/speakingout. Find a tier that best fits you and join as a patron of the podcast. Now let's get into the show. Welcome to this week's podcast with host Jimmy Hinton.
And Jimmy's mom, Clara.
Okay, so current events. We're going to talk about a couple things that are in the news that are making their rounds and are pretty important. But first, we want to say a huge thank you to our patrons. You make this podcast possible, so thank you.
We always thank you, and we thank you for the additional encouragement you give also.
We just had our Q&A with some of our patrons a few days ago, and that was really fun. We had tons of really good questions, and
we did.
We're supposed to go half an hour, but we ended up going 45 minutes.
It was amazing.
Yeah, it was really good.
More. Yeah.
So we do love interacting with our patrons, and to have that time every month is really important to us. So thank you. So current events, there are a couple things that I think are newsworthy. They're in the news. People are talking about it. It's really important. And the first thing we want to talk about is this Minnesota decision that the Supreme Court of Minnesota made that says, I'm going to read the title of this one article. This comes from NBCnews.com. Drunk rape victim was not, quote unquote, mentally incapacitated. Minnesota Supreme Court rules. Okay, so I'm going to read just the first couple paragraphs. They're super short, couple sentences. A person who is sexually assaulted while intoxicated does not fit the designation for a more serious charge if he or she consumed the alcohol or drugs voluntarily, the Minnesota Supreme Court said in a ruling released Wednesday. The opinion stems from the case of I don't know how you pronounce this name.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Looks like Francois or Franchois, Mamulu Khalil, a Minneapolis man who was convicted of third-degree criminal sexual misconduct because the victim was drunk and considered by the jury to be mentally incapacitated. The woman met Khalil after she was refused entry to a bar because she was too intoxicated. So he ended up, short story, he ended up raping her. The lower court ruled that she was mentally incapacitated, thereby not able to consent, and the Supreme Court in Minnesota overturned that. Mm-hmm. Now, before we get too angry at the Supreme Court, I don't pin this blame on the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court has to make their rulings based on current laws.
Right.
They can't.
Right.
The Supreme Court does not have the power to create laws. They can't do it. Mm-hmm. They make rulings on current laws.
Right.
So the unfortunate thing is, the laws in Minnesota are really antiquated, and they don't reflect. They don't reflect other states that say they have laws that say that when you're incapacitated, you're really unable to consent.
You're a victim.
And I think that's
no
common
matter
sense,
what.
right?
Yes,
Like,
you can't make judgment calls.
Right.
You cannot do that.
And I know, unfortunately, laws like this in Minnesota really play into this Christian narrative that, well, you know, you dug your own grave because you went to a party. Yep. You got drunk. You made the decision to drink.
Right.
Okay.
Nobody forced you to drink.
Right. And I want to understand that, but I'm not sympathetic to that argument at all. While it is true that people become incapacitated, they get intoxicated, they make the decision to get drunk, that doesn't give people permission ever to rape them. It should not be justified to be able to rape people because they're drunk.
I thought this
That's
through
not
and
right.
through, and no, and it says, drunk from alcohol and or drugs. Well,
Voluntarily drunk.
voluntarily, yes. And it makes no sense. That law makes
No.
no sense at all because that person, and I'm thinking, there are legal drugs, illegal drugs. If I take a allergy pill, which I need extremely badly right now, if I would take an allergy pill, I'll act like I have some kind of alcohol intoxication going on.
Yeah.
If I take double that medicine, and sometimes I do, because I have such a headache and my eyes are so going crazy and all, I can't drive. I can't do anything. Does that give somebody the right to rape me?
Right. Or
I,
to
I
or
mean,
like these phone scammers that call
oh
people and
yeah,
take advantage
oh
of people
yeah, it's horrible.
because you're mentally
Challenged, yeah,
incapacitated or
right.
intoxicated. Does that give people the right to take advantage of you?
No,
No.
no,
What about lifting your purse from you, robbing
right.
you? If they see you in your car and you're zonked out, does that give somebody permission to open up your
That's a
door
great
and to
analogy,
steal your
Jimmy.
purse
That's a
or to beat
really
the crap
great,
out of
yeah.
you?
Those are
No.
great analogies. No, absolutely not. So why in the case of rape?
Right.
Why is it okay then?
And this reminded me of the case of Chanel Miller. Chanel Miller was known as Emily Doe back in
Right.
2015.
Big case. Right.
When at Stanford, she went to a party. She voluntarily got drunk.
Right.
She was walking home, and Brock Turner, who was, I think he was there on a swimming scholarship. He was 19 years old at the time. She was 22. He pulled her behind a dumpster and was forcibly digitally penetrated her. Thank God there were two bystanders who walked by, and the way Chanel describes it, before they even had time to think about it, they chased Brock down and kept him from raping me because he was going to rape her.
Oh yeah.
So she wrote a memoir which is called Know My Name, by Chanel Miller, and that's been trending as the #1 book in sociology of abuse on Amazon. It has over almost 6,000 ratings. It's a 5-star review. But in California, what happened was that they had a similar law to Minnesota where they narrowly defined what rape was, and it didn't include digital penetration.
Oh wow. Okay.
So because he forcibly
Is that
held her
how?
down,
Okay.
she voluntarily drank the alcohol. Because he didn't penetrate her with his penis, it was not considered rape according to
the law.
the law
Yeah.
in California. So what ended up happening was he got a really light slap on the wrist. He got a 6-year sentence. He served 3 and got out on good behavior.
I remember that case. Yeah.
Now he is a registered sex offender for the rest of his life, but
And he should be.
the point is he got practically unscathed. He
Right.
got a virtually no prison sentence whatsoever. And to California's credit, they went back and they revamped their laws after this case because there was such a public outcry. But with Minnesota, my fear is this story is kind of getting buried among so many other things that are happening right now that I don't know that it's going to get the publicity that the Brock Turner case got.
And it takes a lot of momentum. It takes a lot of publicity.
It takes a lot
to get
of pressure.
Change like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, without public outcry.
Sometimes our laws really stink, don't they?
Yeah.
And you're right. Things need updated. And something like this, you wonder how it ever got on the books to begin with. How did that happen?
Well, I mean, my theory is that a lot of these laws are on the books because you have Christian men who have this old mentality that, well,
If
she
the
welcomed
woman
it
didn't
because,
do
and
this,
when you
right,
hear
yeah.
Chanel Miller talk about what happened that night, she said, I was up on a table and I was dancing and I was being silly and I was having fun. And a lot of men in this old mentality have this idea that, well, you are just inviting
She
somebody
wanted it,
because,
so I
yep,
gave it to
which
her.
is what
Yeah.
Sheila Gregoire
Right.
talks about
She
in
wanted
her
it,
book,
so I gave it to her.
The Great
Yeah.
Sex Rescue. I'm reading my way through that, and we're going to interview her in April.
I'm excited about that.
But she
That'd be
talks about
awesome.
that.
Yeah.
And she's like, there's this inherent idea that men have these needs, these sexual needs that women don't have, and
Right.
they're visual people, they're hypersexualized, and basically women are there to serve them.
They're
And-
there to
and
serve
it's
them,
just
and when
not
they
right.
trigger them in some way, it's a man's right to.
Yeah, it's the man's right,
It's
and it's
his-
the woman's fault.
Right, exactly. And that is a very conservative Christian view that I grew up with in our church.
Yep.
And I can remember lessons being taught about that. I
Yep.
truly can.
Men can walk around in their underwear in front of little kids or women or
Right.
whatever, but girls, the whole mixed swimming thing, girls are they're not allowed to swim in front of men because they might tempt them.
I always laughed when it came time for Christian camp. It could be close to 100 degrees, and yet girls had to wear these hot sweatpants that you wear
Yeah.
in the winter time, and it made absolutely no sense whatsoever. None.
Right.
But they had to be completely covered. At an age of, I remember when your sister Michelle went, she was 8 years old, crying her eyes out. She was so hot.
But the reason behind that
Yeah,
is
and I
that
know. Yeah.
we don't want these girls, children, to be a
Enticing.
stumbling block
Yes,
to these
exactly.
innocent men.
Right.
So
Made me crazy. That
So I
makes
think
me
that's where these laws come
crazier
from.
now. Yeah, and you're
These laws
right.
come from men
Yes.
who wrote these laws that buy into this whole thing that women are the seductresses.
Right.
They're responsible for men acting out.
Right.
This guy. I remember an email exchange that I received from a preacher in the Churches of Christ. This guy was arrested. Trying to think of his name. Man, if I could remember his name, I would say it loud and proud. But this was in the state of Alabama, and he was caught sodomizing a 15-year-old girl in an empty parking lot after a church service on a midweek service on a Wednesday night. A police officer saw this car that was in this vacant parking lot. He pulled in and caught this preacher in the act of sodomizing this 15-year-old girl. I was given an email exchange from the elders of that church by an attorney. He had connections to the church, and he had sent me this email exchange, and we started up a dialogue. And then not long after, this guy passed away, the guy who sent me the email. But the email exchange was among the elders, from elders to elders, and the way they talked about this poor girl, it was
I believe
it
it.
was disgusting.
I believe it.
And they said,
yeah.
I remember the one line, it jumps off the page at me, but I'll never forget. This elder said, this girl, he called her a young woman. This young woman, the way she dresses when she comes to church, and the way she, she hugs all over people, and what his line was, what grown man wouldn't be tempted by someone like her?
I knew you'd say that. Yeah.
She's 15
years
old.
She's a child.
It doesn't matter how
And
she
it
dresses.
didn't matter if she was 60 years old.
Right. That's right.
It wouldn't matter. It doesn't make that right.
No.
Ever.
So,
Period.
all the responsibility was on this
girl.
15-year-old girl,
Right.
not the preacher who raped her, who forcibly raped her and trafficked her. He was pimping her out. And there was
That's
evidence that
awful.
was given to
That's
me
awful.
that I saw both the preacher and her biological father, who was also a police officer, were pimping this poor girl out.
Wow.
And the elders came back and they were like, well, what grown man wouldn't fall into that kind of temptation? So I think it's this mentality that
is why we have those laws.
yeah, the way
Yes.
women dress, or girls for that matter, what they drink, them dancing on tables and being intoxicated, somehow that's an invitation to be raped, and they get what's coming to them. Well, No, that's not okay.
No.
That's never okay.
And we're not saying that getting drunk and doing all that is okay,
No,
but
but
it doesn't invite rape.
no,
Rape is a
but I'm
criminal act. It
right.
is not criminal
Exactly right.
to act silly.
Right.
It's not
And it's not
criminal
criminal to get drunk.
right.
It's not criminal
It's
to
not
drink too much
right.
unless you're
There's
behind
a
the wheel.
big difference.
Or you have public
there.
intoxication where you're just
Yes,
making a
but
complete
there's a big difference
fool of
between
yourself.
that.
But
Right.
yeah. But
right.
you know,
No way.
it's and young people too. I mean, young people, whether we like it or not, many young people they're going to drink, they're going to party, they're at a time in their life where it's going to happen.
Experiment with alcohol. They will experiment.
But that's not an invitation to be assaulted.
No, it is not. And thank you for using that word because that's what rape is.
Yeah.
It's criminal, a criminal act of
Yeah.
assault. Yes.
So that's in the news right now, and we hope that I hope more eyes are going to be on Minnesota. I think the Supreme Court, unfortunately, I think their hands were tied. I don't think that's a group of people who believe that drunk women should be raped. I really don't.
I don't either.
I think they need updated laws, and people need to really advocate for an update in their
And this
laws.
is just a reminder, Jimmy, that the people we vote into office, that we have a voice with them and we can speak to them
Right.
and address things like this in a
Yeah.
proper way and
Yeah.
say we need to see this changed.
Yeah. And this is not a left or a right issue.
No,
It's
it's a moral issue.
It's a moral and a common sense
and
issue.
a justice, an issue of justice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the other thing that's in the news, and I honestly wish it was in the news more. I don't think there's been nearly enough attention on this. It's Governor Cuomo in New York. He's grabbing and groping these women, and he's so defiant. He's given the big middle finger to people and saying, well, I'm not going to resign. Well, good. Then you're going to be impeached. The 9th victim now has come forward. 9 victims. And there's a picture. She did an interview. She worked for him. Her daughter posted a picture of Cuomo. I'm looking at it right now.
Right. Of
Cuomo grabbing her by the neck, like throttling her, and planting a big fat kiss on her in her home. It's just gross when you look at that picture.
Well, it's
just
the way
gross.
his hand is grasping her. And if I read the article correct, it's hard to see clearly. She had a dog that she was holding against her, and it said he pushed that aside, her hand aside, and he gets her, and she said she was so uncomfortable as he's kissing her, and I could see why.
Right. Yeah, just
I
the way
can
he's
see-
grabbing her. I mean,
Yeah.
forcibly grabbing her.
Yes.
And he's leaning in like
He
he's
is
all
very much,
dominating her.
yes,
And I mean,
very
it's
much.
really disgusting.
The body language there speaks volumes.
And she looks really surprised by it
Oh
in,
my
in the
goodness,
picture.
yes.
Like
she's
she wants
stiff,
away from
she's
it.
scared. Look how she's standing as opposed to him.
But she, I watched this interview with her, and she was terrified to speak up. And she said she really feared retaliation. And given Cuomo's arrogant attitude, the guy's a jerk. The guy's a misogynist. He's arrogant, both him and his brother. And so when I saw these allegations coming forward, I wasn't surprised in the
No,
least
I was
bit.
going to say, nah.
And in fact, Governor Cuomo was the one who signed the legislation in New York for the 2-year window.
Which is quite interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, because Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
we have a governor who, in my opinion, is really botching this 2-year window.
Yeah, he is.
And it's just been a complete circus show. And New
It's a
York
fight
was
that
really
we're-
quick
Yeah, they
to
were.
pass it.
Yeah,
and
right away.
Governor
Yeah.
Cuomo signed
Yeah.
this
Yes.
bill that
Yeah.
was for sex assault victims. And it opened up a 2-year window, looking back, where people who are outside of the statute of limitations could open up and
Right.
file a lawsuit.
Don't you think that's part of being somebody in his position, he thinks that he gained a lot of popularity through that.
Yeah, he did.
And then,
Yes, he
it's
did.
like he's the good guy while he's being the bad guy.
Yeah.
Kind of that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think too, he was probably thinking in his mind. He was probably thinking nobody in their right mind would question
Right.
whether I'm
Because look what he did.
harassing
Look what he
all of
saw.
my
Yeah.
all of my
Right.
employees.
Sure. He felt safe. It's that whole abuse thing that we talk about week after week after week.
Yeah.
It's kind of that thrill. If I sign this, I'm a really super good guy.
All eyes are off of me.
Yep, absolutely. So it's all systems go.
And no victim would ever speak up against the governor who signed one of the biggest bills that was I mean, all over national news.
Yeah.
This was touted as the most important bill for abuse victims, for
kind of
justice.
makes you wonder how calculated even that type of thing is.
Yeah.
How well thought out, because if I do this, all eyes are off of me in that light.
Yep.
Yes.
So I think, where do we go from here? I think, one, abuse advocates should be speaking up against Cuomo. I don't see them speaking up. They sure had no problem talking about Trump, and rightfully so, that he's, he was a pervert. He said and did things that were inappropriate. I think he certainly got a lot of attention, as he should have, for being gross and being crude and, inappropriate with women. But I think it's interesting that there's dead silence.
I was going to say, what happened?
Cuomo.
Yeah. It was relentless, the speaking out previous to this. And now it's almost as if either people just flat out got tired, maybe. Tired of all of it.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a
kind of weary soldiers type of thing.
I don't know if this is a party line thing. I don't know, because I've not asked people
I think
why they're not being vocal, but I don't hear anything about Cuomo.
I think people just got to the point of being tired of all the bickering and negativity, and so it's almost easier to draw back and be quiet. And it's that feeling of, so what if we do speak out? So what? I'm reading online on social media, a lot of advocates have slowed down, or they're pulling back and saying, I need a rest. I'm just backing down for a while. Support me in my resting period.
Well, I think, I think part of that is when people do speak out. I experienced this myself in speaking out against Ravi Zacharias. And in fact, I got to see if I can find this. This is really important.
Did you get a nasty email?
No, it was on our YouTube video where we did our episode on Ravi Zacharias, and I want to read this for you guys, because this shows you where people's minds are. Here's one. Okay. This just proves my point. This isn't even the one that I was going to read, but it's from the same guy. He wrote both of these comments, but and his YouTube name is Evangelist. He's a preacher. Oh, I'm shocked. And I love his English too. Why you're not speaking about the women who used Ravi and gained finances? You're injustice because you're highlighting one side, other hiding. Because of women in the beginning of God's creation started, it got cut off there, so I had to click on it. I have a feeling I know where he was going with that. Since the beginning, women were temptresses. Eve herself,
the first sin,
that little vixen, tempted the man.
Yes.
And then his other comment, he that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone. So stop speaking this news in publicly. If you're a real Christian, you should pray. Otherwise, you're still damaging his family. No, I'm not. No. Ravi Zacharias needs, even though he's dead, we still need to point out that the guy was a serial abuser and rapist.
Sure was, yeah. And
And
you and anyone else who speaks out against his actions are not doing the hurting. He did that to himself.
right.
He
Yeah.
did that to his
And his
family. He
and
did
his
that.
family
Yes,
also,
yes.
when they worked really hard to cover it up and they denied,
Right.
all the
And
facts were presented to them.
yes,
I know
yes.
Julianne Smith. Julianne Smith is a friend of mine.
Mm-hmm.
She repeatedly gave evidence, including email exchanges between Lori Ann
Right.
Thompson and Ravi
And nobody,
Zacharias.
yes,
You
discuss
can't get
that.
any more
No,
factual firsthand information than that.
no.
She laid all of that before the board, and
Mm-hmm.
they railroaded her. Wow, this is just, you know, you're just out to get them, and these emails, you probably made this up. No,
It's
these are
interesting,
actual
but it's so
emails.
predictable, isn't it?
Hmm.
Interesting, but predictable. And the same with Cuomo. I mean, it's
Yeah.
he's he is a charismatic person in a different type of way.
Hmm.
He is austere. He demands respect
Hmm.
just by his physical stature,
Hmm.
so to speak. His position. People are fearful of repercussions, like we
And that
said
ought to be a
before.
red flag. That ought
Yes,
to be a
and
huge. If you're
all of
afraid of
that.
somebody when you
Yes,
walk in the room,
yes.
if you're afraid of somebody because of their position, if you walk into a room and you feel intimidated by somebody because of their position, that ought to be a huge red
It is
flag.
right, right. And yet it happens time and time again. And you can see in that photo of the lady how her body
He's
is
just
stiff.
and
She's
he's
like
dominating
this,
her,
and oh yeah, his body is over
physically
her,
dominating
and he's
her.
got her like
Now
this.
by the neck,
It's
he
yeah,
grabbed her
right
by
around here,
the
yeah.
neck.
And it's like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
Hmm.
So yeah,
So yeah, I mean, I think the point should be this. Okay, one, with the Minnesota case, I think we really need to contact legislatures in Minnesota and be like, you guys, all eyes are on Minnesota right now.
yeah.
There is a lot
Well,
of
this is
public
a big
attention on
deal.
you,
Yeah, that's a big
and
deal.
lawmakers, you guys need to make common sense laws that don't create loopholes where it's okay to rape people. That's never okay. It's never, ever, ever okay.
Not in any
No.
circumstance. No.
And I think the other thing is, with Cuomo, I see so many parallels to the church where this respect is demanded because I'm a leader of the church.
Yep.
Don't you dare ever question me. If somebody even implies that, run from that
Right.
church.
Amen.
There is no
Right.
biblical precedent whatsoever for that kind of power, that kind of authority. It does not exist in the scriptures. It doesn't. And I wrote an article. I wrote a blog post about this several years ago that says, "Dear church leaders, you don't have the amount of power or authority that you think you do." And that it became this viral blog post.
Yeah.
And of course, I got pushback from that. And you don't know your Bible. And leadership was established in the church by God. They are the authority. No, they're not. There is not this absolute authority where the buck stops with the leaders. You don't have the right to question them, because it creates this totalitarianism, fear-driven leadership that's
Well, it's
that's
kind of like the
dangerous.
whole the way I was brought up as a kid. Sit back, keep quiet, and don't talk.
Yep,
That's it.
that's
your
right.
job as a kid. We're the
Don't ever
don't
question.
ever. No, no, no. We were not allowed to. No.
Yeah, but it's dangerous, and those kinds of environments lend themselves to abusive people, because
Yes.
abusive people will migrate to positions where they are the absolute
Oh
authority.
yeah.
And as long as people believe that, they will. Abusive people will find themselves in those positions. They will assert themselves in
Sure.
those positions. So it's just dangerous, and I think we really need to call to question those kinds of systems where it's okay for somebody like Cuomo, who very blatant, I mean, in front of the cameras, he doesn't even try to hide it. The guy's just a nasty jerk to
Oh
people.
yeah.
We shouldn't have systems where we're afraid to say you're being a nasty jerk.
What's the guy who was on the Today Show?
Matt Lauer.
Yeah, Matt.
Yeah, he was the same way.
Matt, right. Very much.
Arrogant.
Oh, my goodness,
He
yes.
demanded respect. He demanded people's attention.
Yeah. But he had such a following. He truly did.
Yeah.
But he and women were afraid to speak out. Why? Because of his power and authority. Backlash that they would receive. Who would challenge Matt?
Weinstein was the same way.
Exactly.
He was the guy that, because of who he was, he demanded that respect, and you never cross him. That ought to be a red flag. If somebody's treating you that way.
That's a huge red flag.
If somebody's being arrogant, if somebody's being pushy, if somebody's being a jerk to you.
I understand the fear, though, Jimmy. I really do, because they are bigger than we are. And there's always that thought there.
Yeah.
Singularly,
they are and they aren't.
Singularly, they are.
Yeah.
But when we join together,
right.
And then that's different. And I think that's why your focus, like with Minnesota, is let's join together. Let's make waves. Let's do that with Cuomo. Why be silent? Let's make some waves here.
Yeah, he's going to come unraveled. I mean, make no mistake, he's going to come unraveled here really quickly. But he's going to put up a fight.
He'll put up a fight, but I'm so proud of, now we have 9 victims who have spoken out. Soon it will be 19. And then I think people will begin saying, whoa, this is real.
I mean, same with Weinstein. Whoever would have thought that he would go down so quickly.
Right.
But it happened.
Right.
Because the survivors
Matt got knocked out of his.
Lauer.
I mean, I think he thought he was king of the world there. So. Yeah. And you never hear his name anymore. Isn't that something? Yeah.
No.
It's like he doesn't exist, thankfully.
So, I mean, I guess we can leave you with this truth bomb, but, if you're a survivor, find other people if you're able to. Find other victims, other victim survivors. Find people who are willing to speak up, even if they're hesitant, but there's part of them that wants to seek some sort of justice. Link arms with them if you can, and push back, because I promise you, as powerful as these guys think they are, that power pales in comparison to what power you actually have just by doing the right thing. So I would really encourage you to do that.
Truth always wins.
Yeah.
And it does. In the end, it always does.
Yeah, for sure. So thank you guys for tuning into this episode, and we'll catch you next round.
Thanks again for listening to today's episode. Thank you to our patrons who make the podcast possible. If you found it helpful, please follow on Spreaker and search for the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast in your favorite podcast app. Be sure to hit subscribe and rate the show. If you believe in what we do, consider supporting the podcast by becoming a patron, and check out the cool rewards our patrons receive. Share with your friends and tell the world. Join us in speaking out on sex abuse so we can change the tides and prevent abuse.